begin.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dan Ott, Team 4. We're going to go over the elements of strategy today for our briefing. Here's the agenda for our presentation. We're going to go with our opening statement, purpose, go into our actual question that we'll be trying to define, the definition of strategy, our 3 examples of how the 3 different authors talked about strategy, and then going through with our now what and our closing statement, then we'll open it up for questions. So our question statement that we were presented with was, how did Collins, Gates, Peterson approach strategy? What are their common elements and where are their important differences? Taking what each one of them mentions, how would you develop a strategy for an organization which we're all familiar with, and then how would you make that a developmental supportive culture for those elements of that strategy? Our purpose during this discussion and presentation is to take the current state of the United States government and apply it to the 3 strategies that have been presented in the readings. We'll present the strategy of supportive culture that will focus on team building and how to reach a collective goal with that team focus in mind. We'll focus on how we keep the right people on the bus moving together towards a collective purpose, and how that is a proponent for a supportive culture. I'll be followed by Justin, who will define strategy.
So we thought it was really important to kind of, since we're talking about strategy, we want to define it up front. So we went with the pretty textbook definition of strategy here. A strategy is a general plan or a set of plans intended to achieve something, especially over a long period of time. So that's what we're kind of basing our assumptions off of.
So one of the commonalities between Collins, Peterson, and Gates that we identified in the readings is the importance of having the right people in the right places. We saw that with Gates. He ensured that he had selected the right leaders, the right generals for the different organizations and different military sections that he was in charge of. But one of the key differences that we noted from Collins and Peterson is the idea of developing leaders. Gates did not have the luxury of spending time developing leaders. Because he was in a high stakes position, he had to ensure that the right leaders were capable and were in the position that they needed to be and capable of achieving the mission. And we also saw that he did not tolerate ineffectiveness, and we saw it in the examples that he shared with, like the VA and the different people he got rid of because they did not support the mission.
So keep along the same lines of using people as a strategy, we all hopefully learned through Gates's book that he really emphasized relationships. He emphasized working with people, and one of the strongest ways he did that was making sure he himself demonstrated the importance of relationships, not always in the transactional sense where I need something from you, you need something from me, let's scratch each other's backs, in the sense of I know I might need your help later down the road, so I'm going to support you and build a relationship with you now, so later we can work better together. I think one great example of that was the relationship he had with Condoleezza Rice and with the State Department. The one particular instance was when he was giving a commencement speech, and he advocated in that speech for better funding for the State Department. So he was at that point advocating on behalf of another agency, advocating on behalf of someone that he knew he needed to build a strong relationship with, and that gained a lot of attention because that was pretty uncommon, but he knew that he would need Condoleezza Rice's support later down the road, so he knew the importance of building that relationship. In addition to that, he encouraged the people that he employed to build their relationships. You can see the quote on the screen here that he essentially encouraged anyone that worked for him who had any relationship with a Congress member to cultivate that relationship, because he knew that those relationships, again, would be important. He wanted to create that in culture, that people are important and that we're all kind of unified together to accomplish these overall goals.
Okay, we all know that in complex systems, knowledge is power. It's very important. As a leader, we have to synthesize information. It's so important that our teams feel comfortable sharing sometimes difficult information. And there's a quote from Gates where this was immediately after he was appointed Secretary of Defense, where he said, "I will involve you and I will listen to you." I want to know when you're in agreement with each other or with me. We will succeed or fail depending on whether we operate as a unified team. So that quote automatically lets his team know that I value your opinions. I want you to be able to come to me with your opinions. I think to me it kind of ties to what we just heard from Susan McDowell. She talked about if her team is coming to her saying everything's perfect, she's going to question, wait, everything can't be perfect. So this sets that tone that you can be honest, open, let your boss know what some of the challenges are, and you know that they're going to be received.
The next form of strategy one I want to touch on was discipline as a form of strategy. So Gates really, again, exemplified this really well. It was also touched on in Collins and Peterson's recap. I have a quote here from Gates: "Self-discipline is central to the leadership of institutions and to reforming them. A favorite saying of mine is never miss a good chance to shut up." I love that quote. And I love how he personified it when he talked about how when he was in meetings, he would always be the last to share his opinion. He waited for everyone else to have input, so they felt a commitment, and that's how people feel supported in a system. And so that's why discipline as a form of strategy is really key to us, and I think we really resonate with the group.
For closing comments, just to focus this in on the now what and how to develop a supportive culture, based off what we kind of talked about through each one of our tactics on strategy, really it falls into three categories: people. And then Collins talked about a culture of discipline with those people. You have to have that group of people to enact your strategy. Understanding where you came from, the history that comes with it to make that supportive culture. You have to understand where you came from to move forward. And I think Gates touched on a lot when he took over that very difficult position as Secretary of Defense. And then all moving towards a common understanding. Finally, we'll leave off with a quote from Peterson: the regularity of change should be a personal mindset of all leaders and employees, which can be supported by the organization's culture. So one of the things we talked about, a lot of people in the current administration, which was what we're going through, are getting off of the bus. And you have to have an organization that supports change, and that's part of that discipline initiative, so that you can all move forward to that collective goal, and that's how you really touch into a supportive culture. This time we'll open up to questions.
Oh, I want to hear some good questions. Come on.
I have one. Hi. So, I think it may have been Cynthia, you touched on this. This isn't necessarily directed to you. It's really directed to all of you. I kind of want your opinion on this. But inheriting versus developing leaders. So Gates obviously didn't walk in and immediately start firing away and getting rid of, rolling heads, if you will, when he entered the Department of Defense. And I also think about LBJ when he took over as president. He retained the majority of the cabinet and key people in positions from the Kennedy administration. So I'm just curious what you all think about some of the pitfalls or even some of the positive things of simply inheriting, the leaders that you take, and